Yao was a young IT specialist living in a sleek modern apartment in Spintex. His life was simple: work, gym, Netflix, and sleep. One Friday evening, after a long day at work, he kicked off his new black slippers and left them outside his apartment door. He didn't think twice about it. Everyone in the building left their shoes outside. It was normal. Yao had bought the slippers just a week ago. They were expensive, the kind you would only find in a high-end shop at the mall. He loved how they look: sleek, classy, and just perfect for someone like him. Yao made some tea, ate leftover pizza, and collapsed onto his couch. The city light flickered through his window as he scrolled on his phone, finally drifting off to sleep around midnight. The shrill sound of his phone ringing woke him up. His eyes darted to the clock on the wall. It was 3 a.m. He frowned. Who would call at this time? Yao grabbed his phone. The number was strange. No name, just a string of digits that didn't look like a normal phone number. Hello? Yao's voice was hoarse from sleep. A raspy voice whispered on the other end. Go check your slippers. The call ended abruptly. Yao froze. His heart pounded as he stared the dark screen of his phone. The voice didn't sound familiar, and the number didn't make sense. For a moment, he thought it was a prank, but something about the voice made his skin crawl. Yao got out of bed and walked toward the door. The hallway was silent. Most of his neighbors were heavy sleepers, and the whole building seemed to be wrapped in an eerie quiet. When he opened the door, his slippers were gone. He frowned and stepped into the hallway, looking left and right. There was no one in sight, just the soft hum of the building's generator. Yao felt a chill run down his spine. He turned back into his apartment and locked the door. Maybe someone had taken them as a joke, he thought, but deep down, something didn't feel right. Yao went back to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind replayed the voice on the phone. Go check your slippers. At exactly 4 a.m., his phone rang again. It was the same number. Trembling, he answered. Who is this? The voice whispered again, slower this time. They don't belong to you. Yao's throat went dry. Before he could respond, the call ended. Yao didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He sat on his couch, clutching his phone, his eyes darting to every shadow in the room. By morning, he had convinced himself it was just a prank. He decided to forget about it. He got ready for work, putting on another pair of shoes, and left the apartment. But as he stepped outside his door, he froze. His black slippers were back. They were neatly placed where he had left them the night before. Yao stared at them. The slippers looked the same, but there was something off about them. They seemed cleaner than before, almost shiny, like they had been polished overnight. He didn't touch them. Instead, he went to work, trying to ignore the growing knot in his stomach. That night, as he sat in his living room, the phone rang again. It was the same number. Yao didn't want to answer, but his hands moved on their own. He pressed the phone to his ear. You shouldn't have left them outside, the voice whispered. This time Yao couldn't stay silent. Who are you? What do you want? There was no reply, just the sound of faint breathing. And then in a voice so soft it was almost a sigh, the caller said, they are watching you. The call ended and Yao felt his heart slam against his chest. He turned off all the lights in his apartment and peeked through the curtains. The parking lot outside was empty, but in the far corner, just out the street light's reach, he thought he saw someone standing there, completely still. Yao backed away from the window. He grabbed his phone and called the police. But by the time they arrived, there was no one in the parking lot, and nothing seemed out of place. Yao tried to sleep that night, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching him. At 3 a.m., the phone rang again. He didn't want to answer, but his hand moved as if it had a mind of its own. This time, the voice sounded different, angrier. "You didn't listen, now you will see." Yao's apartment light flickered, and the call ended. A loud knock came from the door. Yao froze, his phone still clutched in his trembling hand. The knock was slow and deliberate, like someone or something was waiting for him to open the door. He stepped back, his heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the hum of the refrigerator. "Who is there?" he called, his voice shaky. No answer. The knock came again, louder this time. Yao's knees felt weak, but he knew he couldn't ignore it. He grabbed a broom, leaning against the wall, and tiptoed toward the door. He looked through the peephole, but all he saw was darkness. Another knock. Summoning what little courage he had, Yao unlocked the door and flung it open, broom raised. The hallway was empty, but something was on the floor, his black slippers. This time, they weren't polished. They were covered in mud, with faint smears of something red on the soles. Yao's breathing quickened. He stepped back, leaving the slippers where they were, and slammed the door shut. Suddenly, his phone rang again. It was the same strange number. "No," Yao whispered, shaking his head. He didn't want to answer, but the phone wouldn't stop ringing. The sound grew louder and sharper, like it was drilling into his skull. With trembling fingers, he answered, "Hello?" The voice on the end was no longer a whisper. It was deep and filled with anger. "You can't run from them. They've already marked you." The call ended, and the light in Yao's apartment went off. Panic set in as he fumbled for a flashlight on his phone. The screen lit up his terrified face, and he scanned the room. Shadows seemed to move along the walls, crawling closer to him. Then he heard it, footsteps. They weren't coming from outside, they were inside his apartment. Yao's face was full of fear, but there was no one there. The footsteps grew louder, circling him, though he couldn't see anyone. "Who is there?" he shouted, tears streaming down his face. A chilling laugh echoed through the room. It was the same voice from the phone. "Your slippers," it said, "are no longer yours." The laughter grew louder, filling the room, and Yao dropped to his knees, covering his ears. His phone slipped from his hand, and the screen went black. When the light flickered back on, Yao was alone. The apartment was silent, but the slippers were now inside, sitting neatly by the door. Yao couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed the slippers, stormed out of the apartment, and threw them into the dumpster outside. But as he turned to go back inside, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The slippers were back on his doorstep. Yao screamed and ran back into his apartment, locking the door. He spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner of his bedroom, too scared to move. The next morning, he called a pastor he knew and explained everything. The pastor listened carefully and then said, "Yao, you have disrespected the spirit. In our culture, slippers are not just footwear. When left outside, they can attract things that don't belong to this world." The pastor came to Yao's apartment and prayed over it, sprinkling holy water in every corner. He told Yao to burn the slippers and never leave his belongings outside again. Yao did as he was told. He lit a fire behind the building and threw the slippers into the flames. As they burned, he heard faint whispers, but he didn't look back. From that day on, Yao never left his slippers or anything else outside his door at night. The nightmares stopped, and the strange calls never came again. But every time he walked past the dumpster outside his building, he swore he could still feel a pair of eyes watching him. Moral lesson: in life, small actions can have big consequences. In Ghanaian culture, leaving your slippers outside at night isn't just careless, it's an invitation for things beyond understanding. Respect your environment and traditions, for not everything can be explained, and some risks aren't worth taking. Kindly subscribe. Thank you.